My name is Adriana Caldwell. I'm 32 years old, and my own family left me standing alone at Gate C-14 in Denver International Airport while they boarded a plane to the Bahamas for a luxury family vacation I had secretly paid for with my hidden fortune. Before I tell you how watching their plane taxi away led to the most devastating phone call my family would ever receive, drop a comment below and let me know what country you're watching from. Because this story about family betrayal and ultimate justice is about to take you on a ride you'll never forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That crisp Tuesday morning at Denver International felt like stepping into the opening scene of a psychological thriller I never auditioned for. The terminal hummed with the energy of travelers rushing toward their dreams. The metallic clatter of rolling suitcases on polished floors, the sweet aroma of cinnamon rolls wafting from a nearby bakery stand, and the constant symphony of gate announcements echoing through the cavernous space. Children squealed with excitement about beach vacations, couples whispered about romantic getaways, and business travelers barked into phones about meetings in distant cities. It was a cathedral of human ambition and joy, and I was standing in the center of it, feeling like the loneliest person on earth. There they stood before me, my family, arranged like a perfectly choreographed wall of rejection. My father, Robert Caldwell, had his thick arms folded across his chest so tightly that his expensive watch, the one I'd bought him for his 60th birthday, dug into his wrist. His weathered face was set in that familiar expression of stubborn righteousness, the same look he'd worn when he told me my business ideas were foolish fantasies 20 years ago. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the muscle twitching in his jaw, a telltale sign that he was about to deliver one of his pronouncements with the authority of a judge delivering a life sentence. My mother, Patricia, stood beside him like a perfectly dressed statue of maternal disappointment. She was studying the boarding passes in her manicured hands with the intense focus of a scholar examining ancient texts, but I knew better. This was her signature move, the art of avoiding eye contact when she was about to participate in something that would destroy me emotionally. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her designer handbag clutched against her body like armor, and her lips were pressed into that thin line that had terrorized me throughout my childhood. Then there was my older brother, Cameron, the golden boy, the Harvard MBA, the one who could do absolutely no wrong in their eyes. He stood there with that insufferable smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, the same expression he'd worn when he'd deliberately broken my science project in 8th grade and watched me cry. His blue eyes sparkled with what I could only describe as sadistic satisfaction, like he was savoring every second of this moment. He was soaking this in, storing it up like a fine wine he planned to enjoy for years to come. My younger sister, Natalie, looked trapped between them all, her eyes darting nervously between me and the departure gate like a deer caught in headlights. She was shifting her weight from foot to foot, her designer luggage, also purchased with my money, though she didn't know it, wobbling slightly as she tried to find a comfortable position in this deeply uncomfortable moment. I could see the conflict written across her face, but I also knew that when push came to shove, she would always choose their approval over my pain. This trip to Nassau was supposed to be my olive branch, my last desperate attempt to bridge the canyon that had been widening between us for what felt like a lifetime. For months, I had fantasized about this moment. Not this moment of rejection, but the moment when we'd all be sitting together in first-class seats, toasting to family unity somewhere over the Atlantic. I had moved mountains in my schedule, rearranged million-dollar deals, and postponed crucial business meetings. I had booked the presidential suite at the Ocean Club Resort, arranged for private beach dinners, and even hired a family photographer to capture what I hoped would be our reconciliation. I had imagined them finally seeing me, not as the weird, quiet tech girl who lived in their shadow, not as the family ATM they turned to when life got expensive, but as Adriana, their daughter and sister, someone worthy of their love and respect. I had foolishly believed that if I could just create the perfect environment, if I could just remove all stress and financial pressure, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally acknowledge my worth. Adriana, my father finally spoke, his voice carrying that flat, clinical tone he used when delivering bad news to his employees. There's been a change of plans. I kept my voice carefully steady, a skill I had perfected through decades of their disappointments. A change of plans, Dad? I just spent 3 hours in morning traffic getting here from Boulder. My mother finally looked up from her boarding passes, her voice soft as silk but woven with threads of steel. We just think it would be better this way, sweetheart. This trip is really meant to be for the immediate family. The immediate family. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs and making my knees threaten to buckle. In that single phrase, they had reduced me to a supporting character in the story of my own family. I wasn't immediate. I wasn't essential. I was optional. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Nassau. All remaining passengers, please board immediately. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. They held all the power. My ticket was somewhere in my mother's purse. They had already checked in as a group. And now, here at the final gate before paradise, they were formally uninviting me from my own generous gift. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined, was that their cruelty was about to trigger a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Because while they saw me as expendable, unsuccessful Adriana, I was actually something else entirely, something that would terrify them if they knew the truth. And they were about to find out. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I scanned their faces one final time, searching desperately for even the smallest crack in their united front. A flicker of regret in my mother's eyes, a moment of hesitation from Natalie, anything that might suggest this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But there was nothing. Just 5 pairs of eyes looking at me with varying degrees of indifference, impatience, and in Cameron's case, barely concealed glee. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed softly, casting harsh shadows across their faces that made them look like strangers. The scent of overpriced airport coffee mixed with the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning products, creating an atmosphere that felt both sterile and suffocating. Behind them, through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the gleaming white fuselage of their Boeing 777, the aircraft that would carry them to paradise while leaving me stranded in this purgatory of polished marble and broken dreams. You're always so buried in your work anyway, Adriana, Cameron added, his voice dripping with that fake concern that was somehow more insulting than outright hostility. He adjusted his designer polo shirt, another gift from me that he'd never bothered to acknowledge, and gave me that patronizing smile that had haunted my childhood. We wouldn't want to drag you away from your consulting projects. Besides, you'd probably just spend the whole time on your laptop. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They had turned my work ethic, the very thing that had allowed me to afford this lavish vacation for them, into a weapon against me. They had twisted my dedication into evidence of my unworthiness. Natalie shifted uncomfortably beside him, her designer sandals, yes, also purchased with my money, clicking against the polished floor. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then caught Cameron's warning glare and snapped it shut again. Even in this moment, even when witnessing this public humiliation of her own sister, she chose their approval over basic human decency. My father checked his Rolex, the anniversary gift I'd had custom engraved with, to the best dad in the world, and sighed dramatically. We really need to board now, Patricia. You know how I hate rushing. The gate agent appeared at my father's elbow, her professional smile bright and accommodating. Mr. Caldwell, we're ready for your party now. I see you have the premium boarding passes. Right this way, please. Premium boarding passes, first-class seats, all paid for by the woman they were leaving behind. Something profound shifted inside me in that moment. The frantic, desperate part of my soul that had spent 32 years begging for their love, pleading for their approval, performing endless acts of generosity to earn a place at their table, that part of me simply went quiet. It was replaced by something else, something cold and crystalline and absolutely unbreakable. An eerie calm descended over me, the kind of stillness you feel in the eye of a hurricane, when the world stops spinning for just a moment before the other side of the storm hits with devastating force. I simply nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice steady and clear. No pleading, no desperation, no tears, just acceptance of what they were showing me about themselves. One by one, they scanned their boarding passes, the cheerful electronic beep of the gate scanner sounding like a countdown timer to a new phase of my life. My father went first, his broad shoulders disappearing into the jet bridge without a backward glance. My mother followed, clutching her handbag and whispering something to the gate agent about upgrades. Cameron sauntered through like he owned the airline, already pulling out his phone to document what I was sure would become his favorite vacation photos. Natalie hesitated for just a moment at the threshold. She turned back, and for a split second, I thought she might say something. An apology, an explanation, anything. Instead, she just gave me a weak, guilty shrug and hurried after the rest of them. The gate agent pulled the heavy door shut with a definitive thud that echoed through the terminal like a gavel falling in a courtroom. That sound would haunt their dreams soon enough. I remained there, motionless as a statue in the river of travelers flowing around me, until the jet bridge pulled away from the aircraft. Through the windows, I could see passengers settling into their seats, flight attendants checking overhead bins. The mundane rituals of air travel continuing, as if my entire world hadn't just been redefined. Then I turned. I walked away from Gate C-14, my footsteps echoing in my own ears like a drumbeat. Past the overpriced souvenir shops selling I Love Denver t-shirts, past the crowded sports bar where travelers were drowning their flight delays in overpriced beer, past the duty-free store where desperate passengers grabbed last-minute gifts for people they actually cared about. But I wasn't heading for the parking garage. I wasn't going home to cry into a pint of ice cream while scrolling through their inevitable social media posts from Nassau. No, I was walking toward a completely different part of the airport, a section most travelers never see, never even know exists. The Executive Aviation Terminal. The atmosphere here was different, calmer, more refined. The carpet was plush beneath my feet, the lighting warm and welcoming. Original artwork adorned the walls instead of advertisements, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel rather than an airport. This was where the other half traveled, the half that didn't worry about baggage fees or middle seats or whether the airline would serve a meal. At a gleaming mahogany reception desk, a woman in an immaculate navy uniform greeted me by name before I even approached. "Good morning, Miss Caldwell," she said with a warm, genuine smile. "The Gulfstream is ready for departure whenever you are. Captain Martinez completed the pre-flight inspection 20 minutes ago." I felt the first real smile cross my face since arriving at the airport. "Thank you, Sarah," I replied, my voice already steadier than it had been in hours. "And please ask Captain Martinez to file a flight plan for San Francisco. I have some very important business to attend to." As I walked through the private security checkpoint, no lines, no crowds, no removing shoes or laptops from bags, I could picture my family settling into their first-class seats on the commercial flight, probably already ordering champagne and planning their first day at the resort. They had no idea that their luxury vacation was about to become the most expensive mistake of their lives. The leather seats of my Gulfstream G650 embraced me like a sanctuary after the harsh fluorescent brutality of the commercial terminal. Captain Martinez, a former Air Force pilot with 20 years of experience flying for Fortune 500 executives, appeared at my elbow with his customary professionalism. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, "we have clearance for takeoff in 15 minutes. Flight time to San Francisco will be approximately 2 hours and 30 minutes. The weather is perfect. Clear skies all the way to the Pacific. I settled into the cream-colored Italian leather seat and accepted a crystal glass of sparkling water from Rebecca, my dedicated flight attendant. The cabin was a masterpiece of understated luxury, polished walnut paneling, cashmere throw pillows, and technology that could run a small corporation. This wasn't just transportation. It was a mobile office, a sanctuary, a symbol of everything I had built while my family dismissed me as a failure. As the engines spooled up with their powerful, reassuring whine, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number I needed. The call connected on the first ring. "Adriana," came the crisp, professional voice of Miranda Blackstone, my personal attorney and one of the sharpest legal minds on the West Coast. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. Aren't you supposed to be somewhere tropical, sipping cocktails with your family?" "Change of plans, Miranda," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning beneath the surface. "I need you to clear your afternoon. We have some very important restructuring to do." There was a pause on the line, and I could practically hear Miranda's brilliant mind shifting into high gear. She'd been my attorney for 8 years, had guided me through 3 major acquisitions and 2 hostile takeover attempts. She knew that when I used that particular tone of voice, someone was about to have a very bad day. "What kind of restructuring are we talking about?" she asked carefully. "The nuclear kind," I replied, watching Denver shrink beneath us as we climbed toward cruising altitude. "I want you to contact Harrison Financial immediately. Every account, every credit line, every financial instrument connected to the Caldwell family name needs to be frozen effective immediately." Miranda whistled softly. "Adriana, that's comprehensive. What happened?" I told her everything: the airport, the immediate family comment, the years of treating me like their personal ATM while simultaneously dismissing my worth as a human being. Miranda listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of disgust at the more egregious details. "Jesus, Adriana," she said when I finished. "I've been handling family disputes for 15 years, and that's particularly cold, even by my standards. But you understand what you're asking me to do, right? This isn't just cutting them off, this is financial warfare." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the ice in my own voice. "Because they just declared war on me at Gate C-14, and I intend to win it decisively." "All right," Miranda said, and I could hear the sound of papers rustling as she pulled files. "Let's talk strategy. First, we need to establish legal grounds for every action we take. The good news is that most of your family's financial arrangements flow through shell companies you control. The bad news is that Cameron thinks he's cleverer than he actually is. My brother Cameron, the Harvard MBA, who had always looked down on me for choosing technology over traditional business school. What he didn't know was that while he was learning outdated case studies, I was building the very companies those case studies would someday analyze. "What has Cameron been up to?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "He's been making inquiries," Miranda said, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when delivering bad news. "Discreet ones, but inquiries nonetheless. He hired a private investigator 3 months ago to look into your business activities. He's also been reaching out to some of your former employees, fishing for information about your net worth." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't enough for them to dismiss me and exclude me. Cameron had been actively investigating me, trying to find weaknesses, probably planning some scheme to get his hands on more of my money. "What did he find?" I asked. "Not much, thankfully. Your operational security is excellent. But he did discover that you're not just a consultant, as you've been telling them. He knows you're involved in something much bigger. He just doesn't know what or how big." I closed my eyes and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just about a family vacation anymore. This was about systematic betrayal, about Cameron treating me like a mark to be investigated and exploited. "Miranda, I want you to accelerate our timeline. Everything we discussed needs to happen today. The account freezes, the loan recalls, all of it. Adriana, if we move that aggressively, the fallout is going to be immediate and devastating. Your father's mortgage payment is due next week. Cameron has that bridge loan coming due for his condo purchase. Your mother's credit cards will be declined when they try to pay for their room service in Nassau, I finished. Perfect. Through the small oval window, I could see the Rocky Mountains giving way to the vast expanse of the American West. Somewhere far below, my family was settling in for their luxury flight, probably already planning their first expensive dinner at the resort. They had no idea that in approximately 6 hours, their credit cards would start being declined, their bank accounts would show zero balances, and their comfortable financial world would begin to crumble around them. There's something else we need to discuss, Miranda continued. The Harrison Foundation restructuring. If you're serious about cutting them out completely, we need to revise your estate planning documents. The Harrison Foundation. My philanthropic empire. Named after my maternal grandmother, the only family member who had ever believed in my dreams. Over the past 5 years, I had quietly donated over $50 million to causes ranging from women's entrepreneurship to childhood literacy. None of my family knew about it, of course. They still thought I was struggling to make ends meet as a freelance consultant. Draw up the paperwork, I said. I want them completely removed from any inheritance considerations. Every penny goes to the foundation, with provisions for continuing the work after I'm gone. That's $250 million we're talking about, Adriana. Are you absolutely certain about this? I thought about Cameron's smirk as they left me at the gate. I thought about my mother's refusal to even look at me. I thought about my father's casual dismissal of my worth as a human being. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. As we began our descent into San Francisco, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. For 32 years, I had been trying to earn their love, their respect, their basic acknowledgement of my worth. I had built an empire in the shadows, donated millions to charity, created jobs for thousands of people, all while letting them believe I was a failure because I was terrified they would find some way to diminish my success. But sitting in my private jet, flying toward a meeting that would reshape their entire world, I finally understood something crucial. I didn't need their validation to be successful. I had been successful all along. What I needed was the courage to stop hiding it from people who would never appreciate it anyway. The plane touched down at San Francisco International with barely a bump, Captain Martinez's skill evident in the smooth landing. As we taxied toward the private aviation terminal, my phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. Conference room reserved. Legal team assembled. Let's go make some people very, very sorry they messed with the wrong woman. I smiled for the second time that day. My family thought they had won some sort of victory by excluding me from their vacation. They had no idea they had just triggered the beginning of their own destruction. The sleek black Tesla pulled up to the gleaming 40-story tower that housed Blackstone and Associates in downtown San Francisco's financial district. The building's glass facade reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror, and as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I felt the familiar rush of being in the heart of American capitalism. This was where fortunes were made and destroyed, where billion-dollar deals were signed over handshakes, and where the truly powerful came to wage their wars with briefcases instead of bullets. Miranda was waiting for me in the marble-clad lobby, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her no-nonsense attitude. At 55, she was one of the most feared corporate attorneys on the West Coast, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients' interests. She had guided tech titans through congressional hearings, helped Fortune 500 CEOs navigate hostile takeovers, and once famously made a pharmaceutical company's board of directors cry during a settlement negotiation. You look surprisingly calm for someone about to declare financial war on their entire family, she observed as we rode the elevator to the 38th floor. I feel calm, I replied, and I realized with some surprise that it was true. The frantic energy that had consumed me at the airport had been replaced by something far more dangerous. Cold, calculated determination. For the first time in years, I know exactly what I need to do. The conference room was a monument to corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of San Francisco Bay, a polished mahogany table that could seat 20, and walls lined with first-edition law books that probably cost more than most people's cars. Miranda's team was already assembled: 3 junior associates with laptops open, a forensic accountant with thick glasses, and the demeanor of someone who found financial irregularities more exciting than most people found action movies, and a specialist in family trust law who looked like she could dismantle a dynasty before lunch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miranda announced as I took my seat at the head of the table, "meet Adriana Caldwell, CEO and sole owner of Meridian Technologies, Cascade Ventures, and Northern Pacific Holdings. Combined portfolio value, approximately $240 million. The numbers hung in the air like a challenge. Even saying them out loud felt surreal after spending so many years pretending to be barely scraping by. $240 million. Built from nothing, grown through 16-hour workdays and calculated risks that had paid off beyond my wildest dreams. "Jesus," whispered one of the junior associates, a young man who probably made more in a year than my father made in 5. "And her family thinks she's what? A struggling consultant?" "They think she's a failure," Miranda corrected sharply, "which is why we're here. Adriana, walk them through the current financial entanglements." I pulled out my tablet and projected the family's financial web onto the room's massive screen. A complex diagram appeared, showing dozens of interconnected accounts, loans, and investments, all ultimately flowing back to companies I controlled. "My father's mortgage," I began, pointing to the first note on the diagram, "is actually held by Northern Pacific Holdings through a subsidiary. Monthly payment, $4,800, which comes directly from an account I fund. He thinks it's his pension paying for it." The forensic accountant made a note, her eyes gleaming with professional interest. "My mother's credit cards, 3 of them, have their balances automatically paid from a trust I established 5 years ago. She thinks my father set it up as a surprise for their anniversary. Total monthly charges average around $12,000. $12,000 a month?" The family trust specialist looked appalled. "On what?" "Shopping, spa treatments, expensive dinners, the usual." I clicked to the next slide. "Cameron's bridge loan for his downtown Denver condo. $1.2 million. Interest-only payments of $7,000 per month, due in full next February. The loan is from Cascade Ventures, though he doesn't know it. He thinks it's from some boutique investment firm." "And Natalie?" Miranda prompted. "Car lease, student loan payments, and rent for her overpriced apartment in Boulder. Total monthly, $6,000. All flowing from the same trust that handles my mother's expenses." The room fell silent as the full scope of the financial web became clear. I wasn't just supporting my family. I was essentially funding their entire lifestyle while they treated me like their personal disappointment. "The total monthly outflow," the forensic accountant calculated aloud, "is approximately $77,000 per year, nearly $1 million annually." "And they have no idea," Miranda added grimly. "They think they're financially independent while being completely dependent on the woman they just abandoned at an airport." I clicked to the final slide, a real-time display of financial markets, showing that while we had been talking, Meridian Technologies' stock price had climbed another 2%. One of my companies had just closed a major contract with the Department of Defense, adding another $12 million to my net worth since breakfast. "Here's what happens next," I said, standing and walking to the windows overlooking the bay. "At exactly 5 p.m. Eastern Time, which is about 90 minutes from now, every automated payment stops. Every credit line gets frozen. Every account that I fund shows a balance of 0. They'll be in Nassau by then," Miranda noted, checking her phone. "Probably just finishing their first poolside lunch at the Ocean Club. Perfect. Let them enjoy it." Because when the dinner bill comes tonight, and their Black American Express gets declined, that's when the real education begins. One of the junior associates raised her hand tentatively. Ma'am, what about the legal ramifications? Can they claim any kind of financial dependency? Miranda fielded this one with the confidence of someone who had anticipated every possible challenge. That's the beautiful part. Every financial arrangement was structured as a gift or a loan with specific terms. Adriana has every legal right to discontinue gift payments, and the loans all have acceleration clauses that can be triggered for any reason. What about your father's mortgage? The trust specialist asked. If the house goes into foreclosure, then he'll learn what the rest of the world learned a long time ago, I said, my voice harder than I intended. That shelter is something you earn, not something you're entitled to. He spent 32 years teaching me that success had to be earned through hard work and sacrifice. It's time he had a chance to apply his own philosophy. The forensic accountant pulled up another screen, showing real-time account balances. The automated payments are all scheduled to fail at 5 p.m. Eastern. The credit card declines will start happening almost immediately after that, depending on when they try to use them. I imagined the scene. My family at the Ocean Club's exclusive restaurant, probably ordering the most expensive items on the menu, maybe a bottle of Dom Perignon to celebrate their successful exclusion of the family disappointment. The waiter approaching the table with an apologetic expression, the gradual realization that their plastic paradise was crumbling. There's something else we need to discuss, Miranda said, pulling out a thick folder. The investigation your brother commissioned. We've been monitoring it, and he's gotten closer to the truth than you might be comfortable with. My blood chilled. How close? He knows about Meridian Technologies. He knows you're not just a consultant. He doesn't know the full scope, but he knows enough to be dangerous. Miranda's expression was grim. Adriana, there's a possibility that this whole airport situation wasn't just cruel family dynamics. It might have been a calculated move to keep you away while they planned something. The thought hit me like a physical blow. What if this wasn't just casual cruelty? What if Cameron had orchestrated my exclusion from the trip for a specific reason? What if, while I was busy feeling sorry for myself, he was planning to use whatever information he'd gathered against me? Show me everything, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Every detail of his investigation, every contact he made, every question he asked. As Miranda's team began pulling up files and spreading documents across the conference table, I felt the last vestiges of family loyalty evaporate like morning mist. If Cameron wanted to play games with my livelihood, if he wanted to treat me like an enemy to be investigated and exploited, then he was about to learn what it felt like to face a real enemy. One with 240 million reasons to destroy him. The documents spread across Miranda's mahogany conference table told a story I hadn't wanted to believe was true. Cameron's private investigation wasn't recent. It had been going on for over a year. Bank records, employment verification requests, property searches, even attempts to access my tax returns through questionable channels. My own brother had been treating me like a criminal suspect, methodically building a case against me for the crime of being more successful than he could tolerate. But as I stared at the evidence of his betrayal, my mind drifted back to the moment when everything had changed between us, the moment when our family dynamics had shifted permanently, when I had learned the brutal lesson that would shape the next 15 years of my life. It was Thanksgiving dinner, 2009. I was 17 years old and my world had just collapsed. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow, so vivid I could smell my grandmother's sage stuffing and hear the distant sound of football on the television in the living room. I had almost skipped that dinner entirely, too humiliated to face anyone, but my mother had insisted with her usual passive-aggressive persistence. Don't be ridiculous, Adriana. It's a family tradition. You can't hide in your room forever. So I had gone, wearing my one decent dress and a fake smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. The house was filled with the warm, comforting scents of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. Aunts and uncles and cousins, creating that particular chaos that only large family gatherings can produce. I tried to make myself invisible, to blend into the wallpaper and avoid the questions I knew were coming. But my father wouldn't allow it. We were all seated around the long dining table that my great-grandfather had built with his own hands, a family heirloom that had witnessed decades of holiday celebrations. My father stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand like a ceremonial sword, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Before we begin," he announced, his voice carrying that particular authority that had terrified me throughout my childhood, "I think we should all acknowledge what a difficult time this has been for our family." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming, but I was powerless to stop it. "As you all know," he continued, his eyes finding mine across the crowded table, "Adriana's little computer venture has failed spectacularly." The room fell silent, except for the soft clinking of silverware being set down on plates. 23 pairs of eyes turned to look at me, and I wanted nothing more than for the earth to open up and swallow me whole. My little computer venture had been 2 years of my life. WebConnect Solutions, a platform designed to help small businesses create professional websites without needing to know code. I had taught myself programming by staying up until 3 in the morning, survived on ramen noodles and determination, and poured every dollar of my college savings into making it work. And it had failed. Catastrophically, publicly, humiliatingly. "Dad, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sudden roaring in my ears. But he wasn't finished. $60,000, he continued, brandishing the carving knife like he was delivering a verdict. $60,000 of her college fund, gone. Wasted on some fantasy about becoming the next Steve Jobs. Uncle Frank, my father's brother and a successful insurance agent, shook his head sadly. Kids these days think everything should be handed to them on a silver platter. No understanding of real work, real sacrifice. "Exactly," my father agreed, finally beginning to carve the turkey with sharp, aggressive strokes. "This family has always believed in earning success through proven paths. Your cousin Jennifer is pre-med at Northwestern. Cameron here is already being recruited by investment firms. And he's only a sophomore at Harvard." Cameron, 19 years old and already insufferably arrogant, gave me a pitying look across the table. "I tried to warn you, Adriana. The tech bubble burst years ago. Anyone with basic business sense could have told you that." The lies in that statement were breathtaking. Cameron had never warned me about anything. He had actively encouraged my venture, even asking for detailed business plans that I now realized he had probably used to mock me behind my back. "But some people," my father continued, his voice rising slightly, "think they're smarter than everyone else. Think they can skip the hard work, the education, the proven methods that built this family's success." Aunt Margaret, always eager to pile on when someone was down, chimed in with her saccharine voice. "Oh, honey, don't feel bad. Not everyone is cut out for business. Maybe you should think about something more practical, teaching perhaps, or nursing." The condescension was suffocating. These people had watched me work 18-hour days, had seen me sacrifice social life and sleep and everything normal teenagers enjoyed, and they were reducing it all to a silly fantasy, a childish phase 1, needed to grow out of. "What I don't understand," my father said, finally setting down the carving knife and fixing me with that cold, disappointed stare that had haunted my childhood, "is how someone so smart could be so stupid. How could you throw away your entire future on something so foolish?" And then came the words that would echo in my mind for the next 15 years. "You're a disgrace to this family, Adriana, a complete and utter disgrace." The silence that followed was deafening. No one defended me. No one told him he was being too harsh. My mother focused intensely on her mashed potatoes. Natalie, only 14. and still believing our parents could do no wrong, just stared at her plate. Even my grandmother, the one person who had always supported my dreams, said nothing. In their silence, they all agreed I was a disgrace. That night, lying on my narrow childhood bed and staring at the ceiling, I made 2 vows that would shape the rest of my life. First, I would succeed beyond their wildest imagination. I would build an empire so vast and powerful that they would choke on their own dismissal of my abilities. Second, they would never know about it. They would never get to share in it, never get to claim credit for it, never get to benefit from it. My success would be my fortress, built to protect me from the people who were supposed to protect me. Looking back now, sitting in Miranda's conference room 15 years later, I realized how profoundly that Thanksgiving dinner had damaged me. It hadn't just hurt my feelings. It had convinced me that my own family's love was conditional on their approval, and that their approval was something I could never truly earn. So I had hidden. I had built companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars, while letting them believe I was a struggling consultant. I had donated more money to charity than they would see in their lifetimes while listening to them lecture me about fiscal responsibility. I had become exactly the success my father claimed I could never be, while maintaining the fiction that I was exactly the failure he said I was. The twisted psychology of it was clear to me now. I had craved their approval so desperately that I had been willing to hide my entire life from them, terrified that they would find some way to diminish my achievements, to call them flukes or accidents or anything except what they actually were, proof that the disgraceful daughter had been right all along. Adriana, Miranda's voice cut through my reverie, we need to make a decision about the acceleration timeline. Are you ready to move forward? I looked around the conference room, at the legal team assembled to help me wage war against my own family, at the documents proving my brother's betrayal, at the real-time displays showing my continuing financial success. They called me a disgrace 15 years ago, I said quietly. Tonight they're going to learn what a disgrace with $250 million can accomplish. Miranda smiled grimly. Execute Phase 1. At exactly 5 p.m. Eastern Time, while my family was probably raising champagne glasses to toast their successful exclusion of the family disappointment, every automated payment in their lives stopped flowing. The disgrace was about to have her revenge. The execution of Phase 1 was as precise as a surgical strike. Miranda's team monitored the automated systems as, one by one, every financial lifeline I had secretly provided to my family was severed. But as I watched the numbers change on the screens, my mind couldn't help but drift to the systematic pattern of exploitation that had led us to this moment. The calls had started about 6 months after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner. I was a freshman at UC Berkeley, majoring in computer science and working 3 part-time jobs to pay for tuition after losing my college fund. I was living in a cramped studio apartment that smelled like mildew and surviving on instant noodles, but I was determined to prove them all wrong. The first call came from Natalie. Adriana, she had sobbed into the phone, her voice thick with tears and teenage desperation. I need your help. I made a huge mistake. She was 16, a junior in high school, and she had crashed my father's BMW into a neighbor's fence after sneaking out to go to a party. The damage was extensive, not just to the car, but to the neighbor's property and a prize-winning rose garden that had been featured in Better Homes and Gardens. Dad is going to kill me, she wailed. Literally kill me. He doesn't know yet because he's out of town on business, but when he gets back and sees the car. Adriana, I can't handle another one of his lectures about responsibility and family reputation. The repair costs totaled $18,000. For a college freshman working at a campus coffee shop, it might as well have been $18 million. But Natalie was my baby sister, and despite everything that had happened at Thanksgiving, I couldn't bear the thought of her facing my father's wrath alone. I took out student loans I couldn't afford, worked extra shifts until my hands were raw from cleaning espresso machines, and somehow scraped together the money. Natalie promised she would pay me back as soon as she got her first job, swore she had learned her lesson about responsibility and consequences. 2 weeks later, her Instagram was filled with photos from a shopping spree at an expensive boutique in Cherry Creek. New designer clothes, handbags, jewelry, probably $3,000 worth of items that my student loan money could have covered. When I confronted her about it, she acted genuinely confused. "Oh, that? Dad gave me money for new clothes because I've been doing so well in school. Besides, you said you didn't need the money back right away." I had never said that. But pointing it out would have made me the petty, grudge-holding sister who couldn't let go of a small misunderstanding. The pattern was established. 2 years later, it was Cameron's turn. He called me during my senior year, his voice uncharacteristically humble and desperate. "Adriana, I'm in serious trouble. I made some bad investments with money that wasn't mine." He had been given a summer internship at a prestigious investment firm in Boston, working under a managing director who had taken him under his wing. Eager to impress and convinced of his own financial genius, Cameron had borrowed $25,000 from the firm's petty cash account to make what he called a sure-thing stock trade. The trade had gone spectacularly wrong. "I have to replace the money by Monday or they're going to press charges," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "Adriana, I know we haven't always been close, but you're the only person I can turn to. Mom and Dad can't know about this. It would destroy their opinion of me." The irony was bitter. Cameron, the golden child, the Harvard business student who had mocked my entrepreneurial dreams, was begging his disgraced sister to save his career before it even started. I had just accepted a position at a small tech startup in Silicon Valley, my first real job after college. My signing bonus was exactly $25,000. Money I had planned to use for a security deposit on a decent apartment, maybe even buy some professional clothes and a reliable car. Instead, I wired every penny to Cameron. His thank you was a perfunctory text message, "Got it, thanks." There was no acknowledgement of the sacrifice I had made, no recognition that I had just given up my fresh start to save his reputation. When I saw him at Christmas that year, he acted as if nothing had happened. Worse, he spent the entire holiday break talking about his bright future in finance, his networking opportunities, his plans to make millions before he turned 30. The money I had given him had become, in his mind, just another stepping stone to his inevitable success. But the worst, the absolute worst, came 3 years later when I was 25 and had just sold my second startup for $12 million. I was finally genuinely successful, but I was still living the lie that I was just scraping by as a consultant. The sale had been structured as an earn-out over 5 years, so the money would come in installments, and I was using the early payments to quietly build my investment portfolio. That's when my mother called. "Adriana, sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to ask for something big. "Your father and I need to talk to you about something important." They had made an investment, a significant one, in a real estate development project in Colorado, a luxury mountain resort that promised massive returns for early investors. The project was being developed by one of Cameron's Harvard classmates, and the entire family had pooled their resources to get in on the ground floor. "We put in everything," my mother explained during a tense family dinner at their house. "The emergency fund, your father's 401k rollover, even some money we borrowed against the house. Cameron did all the due diligence, and he assured us it was completely safe." The development had turned out to be a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Cameron's classmate had disappeared with over $30 million, leaving hundreds of investors with worthless contracts and empty promises. "We're going to lose the house," my father said, his voice hollow with defeat. It was the first time I had ever seen him look truly broken. 40 years of work, and we're going to lose everything. They weren't asking me directly for money. They still believed I barely had enough to support myself. Instead, they were hoping I might know someone, might have connections in the tech world, who could help them find a way out of their catastrophe. What they didn't know was that $12 million gives you a lot of connections. I could have let them fail. After years of treating me like a disappointment, after calling me a disgrace, after taking my help for granted while simultaneously dismissing my worth, I could have walked away and let them face the consequences of trusting Cameron's judgment over basic financial prudence. Instead, I set up a series of shell companies and structured investment vehicles that allowed me to anonymously purchase their debt and restructure their obligations. I created the illusion that a California-based investment firm had taken over their contracts as part of a larger settlement with the Ponzi scheme victims. It took 8 months and cost me nearly $4 million, but I saved their house, their retirement, and their dignity. They never knew I was the one who rescued them. My father spent months telling anyone who would listen about the miracle that had saved their finances, about how sometimes good things happen to good people who work hard and live right. The implied message was clear. Unlike some people in the family who chase unrealistic dreams and fail spectacularly, responsible people like him eventually get rewarded for their virtues. Sitting in Miranda's conference room watching the real-time reports of their credit cards being declined at restaurants and shops across Nassau, I realized that 15 years of this pattern had trained me to be their invisible safety net. I had become so accustomed to cleaning up their messes and funding their lifestyle that I had lost sight of the most fundamental truth: they didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And now, as the forensic accountant confirmed that every automated payment had been successfully terminated, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in 15 years, they were going to have to face the consequences of their choices without their secret benefactor swooping in to save them. Phase 1 complete, Miranda announced. All financial assistance has been terminated. Phase 2 is ready to execute on your command. I looked out the conference room windows at the San Francisco skyline, where the setting sun was painting the glass towers in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the Caribbean, my family was about to discover that their credit cards no longer worked, that their bank accounts showed zero balances, that their financial security had been an illusion all along. Execute Phase 2, I said quietly. It's time they learned the truth about their golden boy's business acumen. Phase 2 required a different kind of precision, not just financial warfare, but strategic revelation. As Miranda's team prepared the documentation that would expose the true scope of my business empire, I found myself reflecting on the elaborate fiction I had maintained for over a decade. The sheer complexity of hiding a $250 million fortune from the people closest to you was staggering, and it had required more than just financial engineering. It had demanded a complete double life. The deception had started small, born from shame and fear after that Thanksgiving disaster. When I finally sold my second startup, Phoenix Analytics, for $12 million in 2012, I was terrified to tell my family. Not because I was ashamed of the success, but because I was terrified they would find a way to diminish it, to call it luck or timing or anything except what it actually was. Proof that their disgrace had been right all along. So I created Adriana Caldwell, the struggling consultant. She lived in a modest apartment in Boulder, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and wore clothes from Target. She took on small freelance projects that paid just enough to maintain the illusion of someone barely making ends meet. Meanwhile, the real Adriana was building an empire that spanned 3 continents. Meridian Technologies had been my masterpiece. Founded in 2014 with the Phoenix Analytics money as seed capital, it specialized in cybersecurity solutions for Fortune 500 companies. While my family thought I was debugging websites for local coffee shops, I was developing encryption algorithms that protected the banking systems of major financial institutions. The company's first major contract came from Harrison Bank. Ironic, given that it was the same institution where my father had his checking account. They paid us $8 million to redesign their entire digital security infrastructure. My father probably saw the news of Harrison Bank's cybersecurity upgrade in the Denver Post business section, and never realized his failure daughter was the one protecting his monthly pension deposits. But Meridian was just the beginning. Cascade Ventures emerged in 2016 as my investment arm, funding early-stage startups with revolutionary technologies. While Cameron was still working as a mid-level analyst at a regional investment firm, making $120,000 a year and thinking he was hot shit, I was quietly backing the companies that would define the next decade of technological innovation. We funded a small artificial intelligence startup that Google acquired for $400 million 18 months later. We invested in a renewable energy company that Tesla partnerships turned into a $3 billion enterprise. We provided seed funding for a biotech firm that developed a breakthrough cancer treatment and went public for $12 billion. Each success was another layer of wealth that my family could never know about. Northern Pacific Holdings became my real estate empire, owning commercial properties from Seattle to San Diego. The building where Cameron worked? I owned it through a series of shell companies. His monthly parking fee, his office rent, even the coffee he bought from the lobby cafe, it all ultimately flowed back to me. The irony was delicious in its complexity. The most elaborate deception involved the family's own financial rescue. When I saved them from the Ponzi scheme disaster, I didn't just pay off their debts. I bought the debt, restructured it through offshore entities, and then generously allowed them to pay it back at below-market rates to what they believed was a benevolent investment firm. They spent years making monthly payments of $4,000 to Western Mountain Capital, never knowing that Western Mountain Capital was a subsidiary of Northern Pacific Holdings, which was ultimately owned by their disgraced daughter. Every payment they made with such gratitude and relief was money flowing back into my own accounts. The psychological warfare extended to every aspect of their lives. My mother's favorite spa in Aspen? I owned the building and had quietly instructed the management to give the Caldwell family a permanent loyal customer discount that covered 60% of their bills. My father's country club membership, paid for through a corporate scholarship program that I had created and funded through a charitable foundation. Cameron's condo in downtown Denver was perhaps my most sophisticated manipulation. When he applied for his mortgage, the bank, another institution where I had significant investments, offered him an unusually favorable rate through what they called their Emerging Professional Program. The program existed solely to give Cameron terms he could actually afford, because I knew his financial situation was far more precarious than his Harvard MBA ego would ever admit. Even Natalie's art school education had been my doing. When she applied to the prestigious Colorado Institute of Fine Arts, she received a merit scholarship that covered 90% of her tuition. The scholarship came from the Harrison Foundation for Emerging Artists, named after my grandmother, funded entirely by me, and designed specifically to ensure that Natalie could pursue her dreams without burden. The Harrison Foundation had grown into a legitimate philanthropic powerhouse, donating over $50 million to causes ranging from education to environmental protection. We funded coding boot camps for underserved communities, provided microloans to women entrepreneurs, and supported research into renewable energy technologies. My name appeared nowhere in the Foundation's public documentation, but every dollar that changed lives could be traced back to the woman my family had dismissed as a failure. The Foundation's annual gala was one of San Francisco's most prestigious charity events, attended by tech titans, political leaders, and celebrities. Mark Cuban had personally thanked me for our support of educational initiatives. Oprah Winfrey had called our scholarship programs transformational. Bill Gates had publicly praised our environmental work. While these luminaries celebrated my philanthropy at events covered by the national media, my family back in Colorado was arguing about whether I could afford to contribute $50 to a cousin's wedding gift. The operational security required to maintain this dual existence was military grade. I had different email accounts, different phone numbers, different addresses for different aspects of my life. My business associates knew me as A.M. Caldwell, CEO and founder. My family knew me as Adriana, the consultant who worked from home and never seemed to have enough money for anything fun. I employed a team of accountants whose primary job was ensuring that none of my success could be traced back to the woman my family thought they knew. I had lawyers who specialized in privacy protection, cybersecurity experts who monitored for any unauthorized access to my information, and even a reputation management firm that ensured Adriana Caldwell Consultant never appeared in the same search results as A.M. Caldwell CEO. The psychological toll was immense. I was living as a prisoner of my own success, constantly vigilant, constantly performing the role of the struggling daughter, while simultaneously running companies that employed thousands of people and generated hundreds of millions in revenue. But the most twisted aspect of the entire deception was how perfectly it worked. My family's dismissive attitude toward my consulting work actually protected my secret. They were so convinced of my inadequacy that they never bothered to look deeper, never asked probing questions about my income or my work. Their contempt was my camouflage. When Forbes published their 40 under 40 inches list in 2019 and A.M. Caldwell ranked number 7, my father read the article over breakfast and commented to my mother that these tech people are all flash and no substance. He was literally reading about his daughter's achievements while dismissing her entire industry as worthless. "Miranda," I said, pulling myself back to the present moment in the conference room, "I want them to understand exactly what they've been taking for granted. Show me the documentation for full disclosure." The legal team had prepared a comprehensive dossier that would reveal every company I owned, every investment I had made, every dollar I had secretly spent to support their lifestyle. Bank records, property deeds, corporate filings, charitable donations. It was a complete map of the empire they had never known existed. "Once we deliver this," Miranda warned, "there's no going back. They'll know everything. The consulting story will be finished forever." I thought about the years of hiding, the constant fear of discovery, the exhausting performance of being less than I was. I thought about sitting in their living room pretending to struggle financially while mentally calculating the quarterly profits of companies I owned. "Good," I said firmly. "I'm tired of being their best-kept secret. It's time they learned what their disgrace has been up to." The war room that Miranda had assembled was impressive even by Silicon Valley standards. 3 walls of monitors displayed real-time financial data, social media feeds, and even satellite tracking of my family's location in Nassau. The 4th wall was covered with organizational charts, timelines, and what looked like a military operation planning board. This wasn't just legal strategy. This was psychological warfare at the highest level. "Before we proceed with full disclosure," Miranda said, pulling up a new presentation, "we need to discuss timing, methodology, and most importantly, protection of your assets. Your family's reaction to this revelation is going to be nuclear." Dr. Sarah Chen, the behavioral psychologist Miranda had brought in for high-stakes family disputes, leaned forward in her chair. She had worked with tech billionaires through messy divorces, helped CEOs navigate family extortion attempts, and counseled lottery winners whose relatives had turned predatory. Her expertise in sudden wealth psychology was legendary. "Adriana," Dr. Chen began, her voice clinical but not unkind, "what we're about to do will fundamentally alter every relationship in your family. When people discover they've been systematically deceived about someone's wealth and power, especially family members, the psychological response follows a predictable pattern: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, and finally either acceptance or permanent estrangement." She clicked to her first slide, showing a timeline of emotional responses. Phase 1 is disbelief. They'll convince themselves it's impossible, that there's been some mistake. This usually lasts between 6 and 48 hours. Phase 2 is verification. They'll frantically research, make phone calls, hire their own investigators to confirm what they can't accept. Phase 3 is rage, often followed immediately by Phase 4, calculation. Calculation? I asked. They'll start computing what they believe they're owed. Retroactive entitlement. Every birthday gift they gave you, every holiday dinner they included you in, every family gathering, they'll calculate the interest you owe them on their past kindness. It's particularly acute in families where the newly revealed wealthy member has been perceived as the, quote, lesser sibling. Miranda nodded grimly. Which is why we need ironclad legal barriers before revelation. Dr. Chen, walk her through the asset protection strategy. Dr. Chen handed me a thick binder. First recommendation: immediate implementation of what we call fortress protocols. All assets transferred to irrevocable trusts with independent trustees. Your personal access remains unchanged, but legal challenges become virtually impossible. The forensic accountant, Thomas Kim, pulled up another screen showing a complex web of legal entities. We've prepared a complete restructuring. Your personal wealth becomes legally separated from your business holdings. Even if they attempt to claim dependency or sue for what they'll call their fair share, the assets are protected in jurisdictions they can't touch. But here's the psychological masterstroke, Miranda continued, clearly relishing the strategic complexity. We don't just reveal your wealth, we reveal it in a way that demonstrates the sophisticated planning you've been doing all along. They need to understand this wasn't luck or timing. This was deliberate, methodical empire building that happened while they were dismissing you as a failure. She clicked to the next slide, a 3-phase revelation strategy. Phase 1, financial shock. Their credit cards stop working tonight in Nassau. They'll spend the next 24 hours in chaos, making frantic phone calls, assuming it's some kind of banking error. This creates the emotional vulnerability we need for maximum impact. Phase 2, controlled revelation. Tomorrow morning, while they're still reeling from the financial chaos, they receive a comprehensive legal document outlining every dollar you've spent supporting them over the past 15 years. Not just the amount, the source. Every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every bailout, all traced back to your companies. Phase 3, total disclosure. 48 hours later, while they're still processing the scope of your financial support, they receive the complete dossier of your business empire. Net worth, company valuations, real estate holdings, charitable foundations, everything. But most importantly, they learn that this isn't new money. This is decade-old wealth that you've been hiding from them deliberately. Dr. Chen interjected with a warning. The psychological impact of Phase 3 cannot be overstated. They'll realize that every interaction they've had with you for the past decade has been based on a fundamental deception. Every time they've treated you as the lesser sibling, every time they've patronized you or dismissed your opinions, every time they've made you feel small, they'll realize they were doing it to someone with more money and power than they'll ever possess. The family trust specialist, Elena Rodriguez, raised her hand. There's another element we need to consider. Cameron's investigation suggests he may have been planning something. We've identified at least 3 attempts to access your banking information through social engineering. He's also been building relationships with several of your former employees. This was news to me, and it hit like a cold slap. Which employees? Marcus Torres from your early Meridian days, before you instituted the comprehensive NDAs. Jennifer Walsh from Cascade Ventures. She left after that incident with the client confidentiality breach. And most concerning, David Park, your former CFO at Northern Pacific. My blood ran cold. David Park had left Northern Pacific 18 months ago after we discovered he had been discussing our acquisition strategies with competitors. We had managed to contain the damage, but he knew far more about my business operations than I was comfortable with. What kind of information could David have given Cameron? I asked. Elena's expression was grim. Potentially everything. David had access to consolidated financial statements across all your holdings. He knew about the shell companies, the charitable foundations, the real estate portfolio. If Cameron has been systematic about his investigation, he might know almost as much about your business empire as you do. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about family dynamics anymore. If Cameron had detailed knowledge of my business operations, his exclusion of me from the family vacation might have been strategic. While I was supposed to be trapped in Nassau with them, playing the role of grateful sister on a family bonding trip, he might have been planning to use his insider information for some kind of leverage play. Miranda stood up and began pacing, her mind clearly racing. This changes everything. If Cameron has been planning a move against your business interests, then what happened at the airport wasn't just cruelty, it was tactical. He needed you isolated and unaware while he executed whatever scheme he's been developing. But here's what Cameron doesn't understand, I said, feeling a cold clarity settle over me. David Park's information is 18 months old. The empire he thinks he knows about is nothing compared to what exists now. I pulled out my secure phone and showed them the latest portfolio summary. Since David's departure, I had acquired 2 additional companies, expanded into cryptocurrency and AI development, and increased my net worth by nearly 40%. The woman Cameron thought he was investigating was managing a $240 million empire. The woman he was actually dealing with controlled nearly $350 million across 6 countries. Dr. Chen, I said, I want to modify the revelations strategy. Instead of 3 phases over several days, I want maximum psychological impact delivered all at once. Cameron thinks he's been playing chess while I've been playing checkers. It's time to show him he's been playing checkers while I've been playing 3-dimensional chess on multiple boards simultaneously. Miranda smiled with genuine admiration. What did you have in mind? Tomorrow morning, while they're dealing with their credit card crisis in Nassau, I want them to receive a single document. Not just my financial disclosure. I want them to receive Cameron's complete investigative file, including every contact he made, every employee he approached, every piece of information he thought he was gathering secretly. I want them to know that I've been monitoring his investigation of me for months. And then, Dr. Chen asked, then they get the real revelation. Not just that I'm wealthy, but that I've been systematically controlling their financial lives for over a decade, while they've been treating me like their personal disappointment. They'll learn that every comfortable aspect of their existence has been subsidized by the woman they abandoned at an airport gate. Thomas Kim looked up from his calculations. The psychological impact will be devastating. They'll realize they've been living as dependents of someone they've been emotionally abusing for years. Good, I said, my voice steady and cold. Maybe they'll finally understand what the word disgrace actually means. Miranda pulled up a secure communications system on her laptop. I'll need about 6 hours to prepare the documentation and coordinate with our contacts in Nassau. We can have everything delivered to their hotel by 8 a.m. local time tomorrow. As the team dispersed to begin preparations, I stood at the conference room window watching the lights of San Francisco twinkle in the darkness. Somewhere in the Caribbean, my family was probably enjoying their first night of vacation, toasting their successful exclusion of the family burden. They had no idea that by this time tomorrow they would understand exactly who had been carrying whom. At 8:47 a.m. Nassau time, while I was reviewing final documents in Miranda's conference room over my 3rd cup of coffee, my secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from our courier service. Package delivered to Ocean Club Resort, Suite 1247. Received by Patricia Caldwell. Signature confirmed. I could picture the scene with crystalline clarity. My family, probably hungover from their celebratory dinner the night before, dealing with the growing crisis of their mysteriously non-functional credit cards. The elegant hotel suite that I had booked and paid for, overlooking the turquoise waters of Paradise Island, had undoubtedly become a pressure cooker of confusion and mounting panic. The first phase of their financial chaos had begun exactly as predicted. According to our monitoring systems, their American Express black cards had been declined at dinner the previous evening at Nobu, the resort's most exclusive restaurant. The sommelier had discreetly suggested they try another card. When that failed, and the third card also failed, the manager had been called over to handle what was clearly becoming an embarrassing situation for valued guests. My father, Robert Caldwell, had undoubtedly blustered his way through the conversation, insisting there had been some kind of banking error, promising to sort it out first thing in the morning. The hotel had graciously comped the meal, a $4,000 dinner that would have bought a struggling consultant 3 months of groceries. But now, 18 hours later, with their banking situation unresolved and a mysterious legal document delivered to their door, the real education was about to begin. My phone rang at exactly 9:15 a.m. Pacific Time. Cameron. I let it go to voicemail, watching the caller ID light up with the international number from their hotel. 30 seconds later, it rang again. This time it was my father's number. Again, voicemail. Then my mother. Then Natalie. Then Cameron again, this time from what appeared to be a local Nassau number, probably the hotel's business center. Miranda looked up from her own phone, where she was monitoring their attempts to reach their various banks. They're making calls to every financial institution they have relationships with. Your father has been on hold with Harrison Bank for 47 minutes. Cameron tried to access his investment accounts online and appears to have been locked out. The beautiful symmetry of it wasn't lost on me. Harrison Bank, where my father had maintained his accounts for 30 years, was the same institution that had paid Meridian Technologies $8 million for cybersecurity services. The automated phone system that was keeping him on hold was protected by encryption algorithms I had personally designed. At 9:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Adriana, please call immediately. Emergency with bank accounts. Can't reach anyone. I showed the message to Dr. Chen, who nodded approvingly. Phase 1 response. Still assuming it's a technical error that you might be able to help resolve. They haven't opened the document yet. But then, at 9:31 a.m., everything changed. My phone exploded with activity. 3 calls simultaneously. Cameron, my father, and my mother, all trying to reach me at once. Text messages started flooding in, each one more frantic than the last. From Cameron, call me now. From my father, what the hell is this document? Call immediately. From my mother, Adriana Marie Caldwell, you call me this instant. From Natalie, are you fucking kidding me right now? The use of my full name from my mother, and the profanity from Natalie, who never swore, told me everything I needed to know. They had opened the envelope. They had seen the documentation. The revelation phase had begun. I picked up on Cameron's 5th attempt to reach me, putting the call on speaker so Miranda's team could monitor the conversation. Adriana! His voice was different than I had ever heard it, strained, almost breathless, like someone who had just been punched in the stomach. We need to talk, right now. Hello, Cameron, I said, my voice carefully neutral. How's your vacation going? Cut the shit, Adriana. What is this document? What is Meridian Technologies? What is Northern Pacific Holdings? Each company name came out like an accusation. And what the fuck is this list of payments? The payments list was my personal favorite part of the documentation. 47 pages of itemized financial support I had provided over the past 15 years. Every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every emergency bailout, every coincidental financial rescue, all traced back to their source with forensic precision. Those are financial records, Cameron. I thought someone with a Harvard MBA would be able to read a balance sheet. I could hear papers rustling frantically in the background, voices talking over each other. My mother saying something about, "This can't be right," and my father demanding to know who Meridian Technologies was. Adriana, listen to me very carefully, Cameron said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he had perfected over the years. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but falsifying financial documents is a federal crime. These numbers, these companies, this is fraud. The arrogance was breathtaking. Even confronted with documented evidence of my wealth and their dependence on it, His first instinct was to accuse me of lying. "Miranda," I said loudly enough for Cameron to hear, "my brother seems to think our documentation is fraudulent. Perhaps you should explain the authentication process we used." Miranda leaned toward the phone, her voice crisp and professional. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Miranda Blackstone, senior partner at Blackstone and Associates. Every document in that package has been notarized, cross-referenced with federal banking records, and verified by 3 independent accounting firms. I can provide you with the contact information for any institution listed if you'd like to confirm the accuracy personally." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Furthermore," Miranda continued, "I should inform you that we are aware of your recent investigation into your sister's business activities, the contact with David Park, Marcus Torres, and Jennifer Walsh, the attempts to access banking information through social engineering, the private investigator you hired through Davidson Security Services. Would you like me to continue?" "Jesus Christ," Cameron whispered, and I could hear the exact moment his world shifted beneath his feet. He hadn't just been caught investigating me. He had been caught being investigated in return by people with far more sophisticated resources than his private investigator and a few disgruntled former employees. My father's voice came on the line, apparently having taken the phone from Cameron. "Adriana, your mother and I don't understand what's happening here. These documents say you own companies worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's impossible. You're a consultant. You live in that little apartment in Boulder." The little apartment in Boulder that I used as a mailing address while living in a penthouse in downtown Denver. The same penthouse that Cameron's building management company, which I owned through Northern Pacific Holdings, sent monthly rental reports to. "Dad," I said gently, "I think you need to read the documentation more carefully. Pay particular attention to the section about Western Mountain Capital." Western Mountain Capital, the investment firm that had mysteriously purchased their Ponzi scheme debt and restructured it with such generous terms. I could hear papers shuffling frantically as they searched for that section. "Oh my God," my mother's voice came through clearly. "Western Mountain Capital. That's you? You're the one who saved our house?" "Among other things, yes." "But why?" my father asked, his voice hollow with confusion. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think you were struggling?" It was a fair question, and one I had been preparing to answer for months. "Because every time I succeeded at anything, you found a way to make me feel ashamed of it. Because you called me a disgrace for chasing my dreams. Because you taught me that my ambitions were embarrassing, my goals were unrealistic, and my failures were proof of my fundamental inadequacy as a person." The line went quiet again. "So I hid my success from you the same way children hide their report cards when they're afraid of disappointing their parents. Except I wasn't afraid of disappointing you with my failures. I was afraid of disappointing you with my achievements." My mother started crying. Not the manipulative tears from the airport, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone confronting an unbearable truth. "Adriana," she choked out between sobs, "we never meant, we didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You didn't ask about my work because you weren't interested. You weren't interested because you had already decided I wasn't worth being interested in." Another long silence, filled only with my mother's crying. Finally, Cameron found his voice again. "Adriana, listen. Obviously, there have been some misunderstandings, but we're family. We can work this out. We can sit down together and figure out how to move forward." The calculation Dr. Chen had predicted. Cameron's mind was already working through the implications, figuring out how to position himself to benefit from this revelation. "Can we?" I asked. "Because yesterday morning you looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't part of the immediate family. Today you want to work things out. What changed, Cameron?" Yesterday was a mistake. We were all stressed about travel and we said things we didn't mean." "No," I interrupted. "Yesterday was clarity. Yesterday was honesty. Yesterday you showed me exactly what I meant to you when you thought I had nothing to offer." The line fell silent again. and I could imagine them in their luxury suite surrounded by the documentation of my hidden empire, trying to process the magnitude of their miscalculation. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to finish reading every page of that documentation. You're going to understand exactly how your comfortable lives have been subsidized by the family disgrace. And then you're going to go home to Colorado and figure out how to pay your own bills for the first time in 15 years. I hung up the phone and immediately turned it off. In the silence of Miranda's conference room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Complete and total freedom from their opinion of me. Phase 2 was about to begin. 3 days later, I was standing in the marble-floored lobby of the Colorado Business Excellence Awards ceremony at the Brown Palace Hotel in downtown Denver. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. This was the same hotel where my father had brought me for my 16th birthday dinner, back when he still believed I might amount to something respectable. Tonight, however, I wasn't here as Robert Caldwell's disappointing daughter. I was here as A.M. Caldwell, receiving the Entrepreneur of the Year award for Meridian Technology's groundbreaking work in cybersecurity. The gala was Colorado's most prestigious business event, attended by CEOs, politicians, and the kind of old-money families that had shaped Denver's economy for generations. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the assembled crowd of power brokers, each conversation potentially worth millions in deals and partnerships. This was the ecosystem where real influence was traded, where a single handshake could change the trajectory of entire industries. My family had no idea I would be here tonight. According to their understanding of my life, I was probably at home in my modest Boulder apartment, working on some small consulting project and eating ramen noodles for dinner. The cognitive dissonance of that image against the reality of my presence at Colorado's premier business gathering would have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. I was wearing a custom Armani gown that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment, my hair styled by the same team that prepared actresses for red carpet events. The Harrison Foundation's publicist had arranged for a photographer from Denver Business Journal to document the evening, though my instructions were clear. No photos that clearly showed my face. Even in my moment of triumph, I maintained operational security. Governor Patricia Martinez approached with her characteristic political smile, extending her hand in greeting. "Ms. Caldwell, congratulations on tonight's recognition. Meridian Technology's work with our state's cybersecurity infrastructure has been absolutely transformational." "Thank you, Governor. The partnership has been mutually beneficial." What I didn't mention was that Meridian's cybersecurity protocols now protected the very databases that contained my family's tax records, voting registrations, and vehicle registrations. My father's pension payments were processed through servers I had designed. "I understand your company is expanding operations," she continued, clearly fishing for economic development opportunities. "We're considering a new facility in the Denver Tech Center. Approximately 800 jobs initially, with plans for expansion to 1,500 within 3 years. The project would bring nearly $200 million in economic activity to the state. It would also cement my position as one of Colorado's most significant technology employers." As Governor Martinez excused herself to work the room, I noticed a familiar figure across the lobby that made my blood freeze. Cameron, wearing his best suit and clearly trying to blend in with the cocktail crowd. But he wasn't alone. He was deep in conversation with a woman I recognized as Jessica Chen, a reporter from the Denver Post's business section. My security detail, led by Marcus Rivera, a former Secret Service agent who now handled protection for high-net-worth individuals, appeared at my elbow with the subtle efficiency I paid premium rates to maintain. "Ma'am," Marcus murmured, "we have a situation developing. Your brother appears to be providing information to a journalist. Should we intervene?" Through my earpiece, I could hear the real-time audio feed that Marcus's team was monitoring. Cameron's voice came through clearly, filled with the kind of desperate confidence that suggested he was in far over his head. "I'm telling you, Jessica, this whole thing is a massive fraud. My sister has somehow convinced people she's this successful tech CEO, but I've known her my whole life. She's never run anything bigger than a lemonade stand." Jessica Chen's voice was professionally skeptical. "Mr. Caldwell, these are serious allegations. A.M. Caldwell has been independently verified by Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and the Colorado Business Council. Are you suggesting there's been some kind of widespread conspiracy?" "I'm suggesting my sister is a pathological liar who has gotten very good at manipulating financial documents. Look, I have an MBA from Harvard. I know what real business success looks like, and this isn't it." The hubris was staggering. Cameron was attempting to discredit my entire empire based on his perception of my character, apparently unaware that every major business publication in America had already done due diligence on my companies. "Ma'am," Marcus whispered, "how would you like to handle this?" I considered my options. I could have Marcus and his team quietly escort Cameron out, avoiding any public confrontation. I could ignore him entirely and let his accusations fall apart under journalistic scrutiny. Or I could do something that would end this whole charade once and for all. "Marcus, I want you to arrange for Governor Martinez, Senator Williams, and the mayor to join me for an impromptu photo opportunity in 5 minutes. Make sure it happens directly in Cameron's line of sight." As Marcus coordinated with the political handlers through his earpiece, I approached the bar and ordered a glass of champagne. The bartender, recognizing me from earlier conversations with the event organizers, smiled professionally. "Congratulations on your award tonight, Ms. Caldwell. It's an honor to serve someone who's done so much for Colorado's economy." "Thank you. It's been a privilege to contribute to the state's technological advancement." As I spoke, I noticed Cameron had maneuvered closer, clearly hoping to overhear my conversation. Jessica Chen was still with him, her notepad ready to capture any inconsistencies in my behavior that might support his fraud allegations. That's when Governor Martinez reappeared, this time accompanied by Senator Williams and Mayor Johnston, the three most powerful politicians in Colorado, approaching me as if I were their peer rather than some random attendee. "Ms. Caldwell," Senator Williams began, "we were just discussing the federal cybersecurity appropriations bill. Your testimony to the Senate committee last month was instrumental in securing funding for critical infrastructure protection." Senate testimony. I had testified before a congressional subcommittee about the vulnerabilities in financial institutions' digital security systems. The hearing had been covered by C-SPAN and attended by representatives from every major bank in America. It was the kind of professional recognition that couldn't be faked or manufactured. "I'm pleased the committee found value in Meridian's research," I replied. "Protecting America's financial infrastructure is a national security priority." Over the senator's shoulder, I could see Cameron's face, draining of color. Jessica Chen was furiously scribbling notes, but her expression had shifted from skeptical interest to professional embarrassment. Whatever story she had been considering was clearly dead in the water. Mayor Johnston joined the conversation with characteristic political enthusiasm. "Ms. Caldwell, I wanted to personally thank you for the Harrison Foundation's education initiatives. The coding boot camps for underserved communities have been transformational for our workforce development goals." The Harrison Foundation, another independently verifiable entity with its own board of directors, annual reports, and public recognition. Cameron's fraud accusations were crumbling in real time, as elected officials publicly acknowledged achievements that would have taken years to fabricate. "Education access is fundamental to economic mobility," I said, maintaining the calm professionalism that these settings demanded. "We're planning to expand the program to include AI and machine learning curricula next year." As the politicians continued their conversation, I noticed Cameron attempting to retreat from his position near the bar. But Jessica Chen wasn't finished with him. Her journalistic instincts had clearly shifted from investigating me to investigating the source of the accusations against me. "Mr. Caldwell," I heard her say as she followed him toward the lobby exit, "given what I've just witnessed, I'm curious about your motivations for these fraud allegations. Are you perhaps involved in some kind of dispute with your sister?" The tables had turned completely. Cameron, who had come here to expose me as a fraud, was now being questioned about his own credibility and motivations. The woman he had dismissed as a failure was being treated as an equal by the most powerful people in Colorado, while he was being escorted toward the exit by a skeptical journalist. As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation after conversation with business leaders who had worked with my companies, politicians who had benefited from my policy expertise, and philanthropists who had collaborated with the Harrison Foundation. Each interaction was another layer of verification, another piece of evidence that the empire I had built was real, substantial, and respected. Around 10 o'clock, as the formal program concluded and I prepared to leave, Marcus approached with an update. "Ma'am, your brother departed approximately 90 minutes ago. Our sources at the Denver Post confirm that Ms. Chen has decided not to pursue the story he was pitching. In fact, she's apparently interested in writing a profile piece about successful Colorado entrepreneurs who maintain privacy while building significant enterprises." I smiled at the irony. Cameron's attempt to expose me had instead generated positive media interest in my success story. As I walked toward the exit, Governor Martinez approached one final time. "Ms. Caldwell, I hope you'll consider our discussion about expanding your operations here in Colorado. The state would be honored to support Meridian Technologies' continued growth." "I'll give it serious consideration, Governor. Colorado has been very good to me." Outside the Brown Palace, as Marcus held the door of my Tesla Model S, I reflected on the evening's events. For years, I had hidden my success from a family that saw me as a failure. Tonight, I had been publicly celebrated by the most powerful people in Colorado, while my brother attempted to discredit me to a journalist who immediately recognized his accusations as baseless. The role reversal was complete. Cameron, who had always seen himself as the successful sibling, had been exposed as someone whose primary accomplishment was being related to me. Meanwhile, the sister he had dismissed as a disgrace was being courted by governors and senators as a peer and an asset to the state. As we drove through downtown Denver, past the building where Cameron worked in his mid-level analyst position, the same building I owned through Northern Pacific Holdings, I realized that tonight had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It hadn't just revealed my success to the people who mattered. It had finally freed me from caring about the opinions of the people who didn't. 2 weeks after the Colorado Business Excellence Awards, I received an encrypted message from Marcus Rivera that made my stomach drop. "Family members are en route to your Denver residence. ETA, approximately 3 p.m. Recommend security consultation before engagement." They had found me. Not the modest Boulder apartment that served as my public address, but my actual residence, the penthouse in the Meridian Tower, a luxury high-rise in downtown Denver's most exclusive district. The same building where I maintained my private office, where I conducted the business that they had spent weeks trying to convince themselves was fraudulent. I was in the middle of a video conference with potential investors from Singapore when Marcus's message came through. Cascade Ventures was considering a $40 million investment in a quantum computing startup, and the timing was crucial. But family emergencies, I had learned, had a way of disrupting even the most important business. "Gentlemen," I said to the screen full of concerned Asian faces, "I'm going to need to reschedule this discussion. Something urgent has come up that requires my immediate attention." As I closed the laptop, I could see through my floor-to-ceiling windows that a familiar Toyota Camry, my father's car, was pulling into the visitor parking area 30 floors below. They had driven the 5 hours from Colorado Springs to Denver, probably spending the entire trip planning this confrontation. Miranda Blackstone was already in the building, having arrived an hour earlier for our scheduled review of the Harrison Foundation's quarterly reports. When I called her office to explain the situation, she immediately shifted into crisis management mode. "Adriana, do not engage with them alone. Whatever they're planning, they've had 2 weeks to prepare. This isn't going to be a casual family visit." She was right. The encrypted communication from my cybersecurity team had been monitoring their digital activity since the Nassau revelations. Cameron had been researching federal wire fraud statutes, apparently convinced that my financial empire was somehow illegal. My father had been calling lawyers, not to sue me, but to understand whether they had any legal claim to assets they had unknowingly been benefiting from for years. Most concerning, Natalie had been active on social media, posting cryptic messages about quote, family betrayal and, quote, people who pretend to be something they're not. The posts had been subtle enough to avoid direct defamation, but clear enough to signal that she was building a narrative around my deception rather than their exploitation. Marcus arrived at my penthouse with 2 additional security personnel, all of them carrying the kind of discreet equipment that suggested they were prepared for this conversation to escalate beyond mere family drama. "Ma'am," Marcus briefed me as we watched the elevator indicator climb toward the 40th floor, "our intelligence suggests they've been coordinating this approach for several days. They've been staying at a hotel near the airport, apparently planning their strategy." The elevator chimed, and through the security monitor I could see all 4 of them, my parents looking older and more haggard than I remembered, Cameron wearing a suit that was probably intended to project authority but only emphasized his diminished circumstances, and Natalie clutching a thick folder that undoubtedly contained whatever evidence they thought they had assembled. When I opened the door, the first thing that struck me was the smell. That distinctive combination of my mother's perfume and my father's aftershave that had defined my childhood. For a moment, I was transported back to Saturday mornings when I was 7 years old, climbing into their bed to watch cartoons and feeling like the most loved child in the world. Then I remembered standing alone at Gate C-14 in Denver International Airport, watching them board a plane to paradise while leaving me behind. "Hello," I said simply, stepping aside to allow them entry. They filed into my living space like tourists entering a museum, their eyes wide with disbelief as they took in the panoramic views of downtown Denver, the original artwork on the walls, the furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. This wasn't the cramped Boulder apartment they had imagined. This was the home of someone with serious wealth. My father was the first to speak, his voice carrying that familiar tone of controlled anger that had terrified me throughout my childhood. "Adriana, we need to talk. All of us. Right now." "Certainly. Please, have a seat." I gestured toward the Italian leather sectional that dominated the living area. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? Champagne to celebrate our reunion?" The sarcasm wasn't lost on any of them. Cameron's face flushed red, a sure sign that his temper was already reaching dangerous levels. "Cut this shit, Adriana," he snapped, dropping his carefully prepared composure within seconds of entering my home. "We've spent the last 2 weeks trying to figure out what the hell you've been doing, and we want answers." "What I've been doing," I replied calmly, "is building a business empire while you've been taking credit for success you didn't earn and spending money you didn't make." My mother opened her mouth to speak, probably to deliver one of her practice speeches about family loyalty and forgiveness, but I held up my hand to stop her. "Before any of you say another word, I want you to understand something very clearly. You are not here as my family. You are here as people who have systematically exploited my generosity while simultaneously treating me like a disappointment. This is not a reconciliation. This is a business meeting." The change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. They had come expecting to find their struggling sister, the one they could guilt and manipulate. Instead, they were facing A.M. Caldwell, CEO, the woman who had testified before Congress and been courted by governors. Natalie pulled out her folder with trembling hands. "Adriana, we've been researching everything, the companies, the foundations, the investments, and we found inconsistencies." "Such as?" "The timelines don't make sense," Cameron interjected, clearly proud of whatever analysis he thought he had conducted. "According to public records, Meridian Technologies was founded in 2014, but you claim to have been building this empire for over a decade. The math doesn't add up." I couldn't help but smile. "Cameron, did your Harvard MBA program not cover corporate restructuring?" "Meridian Technologies was incorporated in 2014, but it was built on the foundation of Phoenix Analytics, which I sold in 2012. Before that, there was WebConnect Solutions, which you watched fail spectacularly in 2009. The mention of WebConnect Solutions hit him like a physical blow. That was the company he had mocked, the failure that my father had used to call me a disgrace at Thanksgiving dinner 15 years ago. "You mean," my mother whispered, her voice barely audible, "the computer thing that failed, that became all this?" "No, Mom, the computer thing that failed taught me lessons that I used to build all this. There's a difference between failing and learning from failure." My father stood up abruptly, his face red with what I could only describe as rage mixed with humiliation. "This is insane. You've been lying to us for years. Years, Adriana. Do you understand what that makes you?" "Successful," I replied without hesitation. "It makes me successful, something you taught me to be ashamed of." "We never taught you to be ashamed of success," he shouted. "We taught you to be realistic. We taught you that pipe dreams and fantasy businesses don't pay the bills." "And yet," I said, walking to the window and gesturing toward the city spread out below us, "my pipe dreams have been paying your bills for 15 years. The silence that followed was deafening. This was the truth they had been trying to avoid since Nassau, the fundamental reality that recontextualized every interaction we had ever had as adults. Cameron tried one final, desperate gambit. "Adriana, look, I know we've had our differences, but we're family. Blood is thicker than water. We can work this out. Maybe there's a way for all of us to benefit from your success." And there it was, the calculation Dr. Chen had predicted. The moment when their shock and anger transformed into naked greed. "Cameron," I said, turning away from the window to face him directly, "let me be very clear about something. Blood may be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than broken trust. And you've spent the last 15 years teaching me that your love comes with conditions, terms, and a price tag." I walked to my desk and pulled out a document that Miranda had prepared for exactly this moment. "This is a comprehensive financial statement showing every dollar I've spent supporting this family over the past 15 years. The total comes to just over $4 million. Consider it an education expense. I was paying to learn what you really thought of me." Natalie started crying. Not the manipulative tears I had seen so many times before, but the deep, soul-crushing sobs of someone confronting the magnitude of their own selfishness. "But that doesn't include interest," I continued, "or the opportunity cost of what that money could have earned if I had invested it instead of giving it to people who saw me as their personal disappointment." "Adriana, please," my mother pleaded. "We can fix this. We can be better. We can be the family you deserved." "No," I said firmly, "you can't. Because being the family I deserved would have meant seeing my worth before you knew my net worth. It would have meant celebrating my dreams instead of calling them embarrassing. It would have meant including me in the immediate family instead of leaving me at an airport gate." I opened the door to my penthouse, signaling that this conversation was over. "You wanted to understand what I've been doing for the past 15 years? I've been learning to build a life that doesn't depend on your approval. And it turns out I'm very good at it." As they filed out of my home, looking smaller and more defeated than I had ever seen them, I realized that this wasn't victory. It was simply the end of a very long, very expensive lesson about the difference between family and people who happen to share your DNA. 18 months after that final confrontation in my penthouse, I was standing in the sculpture garden of the Denver Art Museum, watching the sun set over the Rocky Mountains. The Harrison Foundation was hosting its annual Scholarship Awards ceremony, and I was preparing to present grants to 12 young entrepreneurs whose dreams reminded me of my own at their age. The past year and a half had been a period of profound transformation, not just for me, but apparently for my family as well. The silence that followed their departure from my penthouse had been complete. No phone calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation through mutual relatives. It was as if we had mutually agreed to exist in parallel universes that no longer intersected. But silence, I had learned, was not the same as invisibility. Through the discreet monitoring that Marcus's team maintained for security purposes, I knew more about their post-revelation lives than they probably realized. My father had taken early retirement from his job at the engineering firm, selling their house in Colorado Springs and moving to a modest condo in Pueblo. He had started a small consulting practice, helping other retirees navigate financial planning. According to his LinkedIn profile, which I checked perhaps more often than I should have, he was learning the value of living within one's means and, quote, discovering the satisfaction of earned success. My mother had found work as a part-time receptionist at a local nonprofit that provided services to elderly residents. The organization's annual report, which I received because I had made an anonymous donation through the Harrison Foundation, mentioned a volunteer named Patricia Caldwell who had brought exceptional organizational skills and genuine compassion to our client services. Cameron's transformation had been the most dramatic. The brother who had dismissed my entrepreneurial dreams had apparently discovered his own. After leaving his analyst position, whether voluntarily or otherwise remained unclear, he had started a small financial consulting firm, specializing in helping families recover from investment fraud. His website included a personal statement about learning hard lessons about the difference between inherited privilege and earned success. The irony was not lost on me. Cameron was now helping other families navigate the kind of financial disaster that had once threatened our own family, never knowing that his sister had been the one who saved them from experiencing its full devastation. Natalie had perhaps changed the most. She had returned to school, completing her degree in art therapy, while working full-time as a shift supervisor at a retail store. Her Instagram had transformed from a showcase of luxury purchases to a documentation of her artistic journey. Her recent posts showed paintings and sculptures that explored themes of family, identity, and redemption. One piece, titled "The Weight of Expectations," had been featured in a local gallery show. They were all, in their own ways, learning to build lives based on their own efforts rather than my hidden subsidies. And according to every indication I could observe, they were succeeding. The question that had haunted me for months was whether this growth would have been possible if I had continued enabling their dependence. Had my withdrawal of financial support forced them to discover strengths they never knew they possessed? Or had I simply abandoned people who were struggling to understand their own worth? Dr. Chen, who had become something of a regular consultant as I navigated the psychological aftermath of family estrangement, had a theory about what she called productive destruction. Sometimes, she had explained during one of our sessions, the kindest thing you can do for people you love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Growth often requires discomfort. Tonight, as I prepared to celebrate the achievements of young entrepreneurs who were building their dreams despite obstacles and skepticism, I found myself thinking about that theory. One of the scholarship recipients, a 19-year-old named Maria Santos, reminded me particularly of my younger self. She had developed an app to help immigrant families navigate the healthcare system, working out of her bedroom while attending community college full-time, and supporting her family as a restaurant server. "Miss Caldwell," she said as I presented her with the $10,000 Harrison Foundation scholarship, "this grant is going to change everything for me and my family. I can't thank you enough." "Don't thank me," I replied, meaning it more than she could possibly understand. "Thank yourself. You did the work, you had the vision. You persevered through the doubt and the obstacles. This grant is just recognition of what you've already accomplished." As the ceremony concluded and the families gathered for photographs, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the crowd, Natalie, wearing a simple black dress and holding what appeared to be a small wrapped gift. My security team had noticed her as well. Marcus appeared at my elbow, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, your sister has been waiting outside the venue for approximately 30 minutes. She hasn't attempted to approach or caused any disturbance. Your instructions?" I studied Natalie from across the garden. She looked different. Older, certainly, but also more grounded somehow. The restless energy that had characterized her throughout her 20s had been replaced by something that looked like patience, maybe even wisdom. Give me 5 minutes to finish with the recipients, then let her approach. As I completed the final round of congratulations and photos, I found myself wondering what Natalie wanted: an apology, financial assistance, or simply the opportunity to have a conversation that didn't involve accusations and defenses. When she finally approached, her first words surprised me. "Adriana, I wanted to give you this." She held out the small wrapped package. "It's not much, but I made it myself." Inside the tissue paper was a small ceramic sculpture, a bird in flight, its wings spread wide against an invisible wind. The craftsmanship was remarkable. But more than that, there was something in the piece that spoke to themes of liberation and transformation. "I call it breaking free," Natalie said quietly. "It's about learning to fly when you've been caged, even when the cage was built by people who thought they were protecting you." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 18 months of separation between us. "Natalie," I began, but she held up her hand. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "I'm not here to apologize, because words don't fix what we did to you. I'm just here to say that I finally understand what you were trying to tell us. About earned success. About building something that belongs to you." She paused, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. "I have a job that I'm good at. I have an art practice that brings me joy. I have an apartment that I pay for myself. It's not much, but it's mine. And for the first time in my life, I understand why that matters. I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it completely. "I know you are," she replied with a small smile. "I can see it in your face. And that means more to me than any money ever could have." As Natalie turned to leave, she paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, Adriana, we all know now that you were never the family failure. You were the family teacher. We just weren't ready for the lesson." Watching my younger sister walk away into the Denver evening, I realized that the story that had begun with abandonment at an airport gate had not ended with revenge or reconciliation. It had ended with something far more valuable: the understanding that love, real love, sometimes requires the courage to let people discover their own strength. The Harrison Foundation's scholarship recipients would use their grants to build businesses, create art, and change communities. My family had used the removal of my financial support to build character, resilience, and self-respect. Both transformations had required the same catalyst: the space to succeed or fail on their own merits. As I walked back to my car, past the sculpture garden, where dreams were celebrated and futures were funded, I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood: complete peace with my place in the world. I had learned to build a life that didn't depend on other people's approval. My family had learned to build lives that didn't depend on my money. And perhaps, for the first time in our shared history, we were all exactly where we needed to be. Thank you for following this journey with me. If you've ever felt undervalued by people who should have celebrated your dreams, if you've ever had to choose between being loved for who you are versus what you can provide, if you've ever discovered that the strongest wings are the ones you build yourself, then you understand that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you had to choose your own worth over someone else's opinion. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your power in unexpected places. Your dreams are not too big, your ambitions are not embarrassing. And you are not responsible for making yourself smaller so that other people feel more comfortable. Build your empire, define your family, fly free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.